Hi, everyone. I am Hope Edelman. I'm the author of Motherless Daughters, Motherless Mothers, my most recent book, The After Grief, and a couple of other books in between. I am the founder and co-facilitator of Motherless Daughters and these community calls. And today is February 21st, 2023, and we have a guest speaker today. Today's guest joining us is Ariane Price. Hi, Ariane.
Hi, Ho. Hi,
Oh,
everybody.
for
I'm
being
so
here
happy to be here.
today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm going to tell the group a little bit about you, if
Great.
that's okay, and then we'll dive in. Ariane is a member of Los Angeles's famed Groundlings Theatre, where she writes and teaches and performs improv and sketch comedy. You may have seen her on screen in Bridesmaids, Barb and Star Go to Vista Del Mar, Parenthood, Modern Family. She's been around. Ariane is also a motherless daughter. She lost her mom when she was just 3 years old. And she's here today to talk with us about how acting and humor and improv specifically helped her heal over the years from the early death of her mom and from growing up without her mom. So welcome, Ariane. We're really lucky to have you here today. And you told me earlier that that's a picture of your mom in the background.
Yeah, I just decided to put her here for this. And yeah, anyway, so it's only fairly recently that I have pictures of her around, which is kind of crazy considering I'm almost 49 years old and she died when I was 3. So part of the process.
Well, I thought maybe we could start with you sharing some of the details of your story of mother loss with us, and just, sort of give us some backstory for what's about to come.
Yes. So the basic story, which I kind of get more information on, I mean, you'd think I'd have all of it. But anyway, incidentally, my dad wrote an article. I should try to maybe pin that because that has all the information for Parents Magazine called Conversations with Ariane. He was a child psychiatrist and he kind of wrote his story of what happened. But in my memory, and what I've been told, I lived in Manhattan Beach with my dad and mom, and those were back in the days when people could live there. It was like a lot of stewardesses, a lot of just, it's not what it is today. And my mom was 5 months pregnant with a boy, who would have been my brother, and she went and got her teeth cleaned. No big deal. She was a healthy person. Both parents were alive, healthy lineage, and then just started to feel kind of sick and kind of tired and kind of off in a very random way. And people just said, well, you're 5 months pregnant. Of course you feel that way. And I guess it just she kept feeling worse and worse. And it was Christmas Eve. And I guess both sides of the family met up, and they met up, and she drove herself to UCLA, and she basically died 1 month later of an infection in her heart due to a mitral valve prolapse, I believe, which is just a little thing where some of the blood that's moved through stays back. It doesn't go completely through. And I guess from getting her teeth cleaned, all of the bacteria that's in your mouth, it got into her bloodstream. Totally something that had she figured out sooner, would have been cured by antibiotics. Also, her dad and my dad are both doctors. So yeah. So apparently I would roller skate at the hospital for that month. And then she just died. And my dad told me, I guess, in Manhattan Beach, like on the boardwalk. And my dad's mother moved in with us. Luckily, she was really, really close to me. Before my mom died, I recently found a diary of my mom's. I recently found all this stuff of my mom's, but it talks about how I was always really, really good with grandmother Putnam, or who I called her Giggy. In a weird way, I feel like she was like meant to be my mother in a weird way. But so she was there. And then the 3 of us moved into a house in Encinitas, which is a suburb of San Diego. It's about 90 minutes from here, that my dad and mom picked out. So they were planning on moving there anyway. And instead we moved with my grandmother. And my grandmother was super nurturing, just like the ultimate like 50s mother, 1950s, just like comfort food and just the best. So that was a huge blessing. But then my dad, about 3 years later, got remarried, and kind of in a volatile moment, kind of my grandma was kind of kicked out, for lack of a better word. My dad was like only 33 at the time, and he wanted to, start his life with this new woman who had 3 sons. They were both, I was 6, so there was one who was 7, one who was 5, and one who was maybe 9. I absolutely adored them. My stepmom was pregnant soon after they got married, and I had a little sister, which was freaking amazing. I loved her. Unfortunately, my relationship with my stepmom, so like at their wedding, I was 6 and I started to cry for joy. And someone said, "Why are you crying?" And I said, "Because I'm going to have a mom." And that was not really what happened. So, yeah, anyway, it was a very, very, very tough relationship. So that's that.
That is a common story in our community.
Yeah.
Yeah, relationships with fathers are often fraught. Relationships with stepmothers often even more so. Yeah.
Yeah. And I want to, at this point, it changes year to year. I want to give her, grace. But I guess just the easiest way to say it would be, both she and my dad had come out of obviously like kind of traumatic, difficult situations. They decided like, let's get married and we're going to have the Brady Bunch and it's going to be great. And they had a very unhappy kind of relationship. My dad would point out we had family dinners, we went on amazing trips. I loved my brothers, so that was amazing. But it was pretty rough. And I just don't think I was the kind of girl she wanted. I just don't think she liked me as a person. That's not even a judgment against her, but yeah. So I don't want to, I don't want to badmouth anyone. She's 80 years old and God bless her. I did learn some things from her, but it was incredibly difficult. And, even at this age, I'm still healing from so many beliefs about myself. And yeah.
Right. And as you know, as we often talk about here, it is not just the death of a mom or the trauma of the mom's death, but it is how it is handled and everything that comes after.
Yeah.
That affect us just as much, and sometimes even more so.
Yeah.
Well, Ariane, how'd you discover acting and comedy in this crowded family and, and all of this, with all of this going on? How'd you know it was the right fit for you? Like when did you know?
I just really think as soon as I learned what improv was, that I was like, that's what I want to do, even more than acting. I mean, when I was little, I think I wanted to be a waitress and I got like a pad to take people's orders and that was really exciting. But as soon as so I got to live that dream, but being funny and trying to find the humor in things, even the dark humor in things. I remember in elementary school, like I had this group of friends and we would say, let's laugh, let's laugh. And so we'd go to a part of the playground and we would just laugh. And the more we laughed, the more we think of things to laugh about. And I'm really lucky. I have a friend I met in first grade. We ended up being college roommates. We're still friends. Her name is Corey. And she's the one who told me, when you move to LA, you need to look at the Groundlings. It's just laughter, almost more than acting. It was seeking out laughter. You can't really force laughter, but there was something about her where it was just constant laughter. So when I found in high school, I learned what improv was, and it was so free. There was no script. I'm terrible at memorizing things. And something just clicked in my brain where I could make connections and I could make things that the audience, people thought later on was funny. And, but what mattered most was that, it was feeding something in me.
I have so many questions based on what you've just said, but first I'm really curious, those little girls or boys, also your friends in grade school who would go off and say, let's laugh. Do you know if any of them had complicated or difficult stories of their own? Were they looking for a release or looking for some levity, or were they just funny, happy-go-lucky kids?
I think it was a combination, but I was definitely known as like well, before I was known as like, she's funny, I was weird. She's really weird. You're weird. Which was fine, but I was more the ringleader of it. And also my stepbrother, my younger one, we would laugh all the time. And I don't know how it would just be at nothing, but it was the best thing ever. And my grandma had a really great sense of humor too. Laughing till you can't, like, you know, till your stomach hurts.
Right. Right.
You can't always make that happen. Believe me. I mean, that's not happening for me every day. We go through ups and downs, but I do think that was the impetus of like Groundlings. Like that's what I wanted to do, as opposed to studying drama somewhere very serious.
Right. So it was you. So you were, it sounds like you were inspired by the ability to laugh and make other people laugh.
To laugh together, to laugh collectively. It's like a meditative experience, you know.
So
Yeah.
I'm curious, when you discovered improv, because I've always thought about improv as being a certain kind of, I mean, certainly a skill, but a talent, like a natural talent, like your brain has to be able to make certain connections in a way, and you can be trained to do it, of course, right? But does it help if you can just come into it and you're a quick thinker and you're witty and by nature?
I think so. What I say to my students, because I teach at the Groundlings, and I'm super happy to be totally proven wrong, is that I can teach. So you have to look at it in teaching like I'm teaching painting. So I can teach you how to hold the brush. I can teach you maybe what colors might work well together, or about like perspective and this and that. But whether or not you end up being Monet or Van Gogh or whoever is something else, and also something you might have been able to do without having learned those things. Yeah. And also comedy is totally subjective. I mean, I find what's funny. There's people who find I'm funny. There's people who don't. I mean, it's not, you can't teach funny, but you can teach the basic principles of improv, which I get really excited about as they pertain to life. But yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, there's some basic kind of rules. And again, people are like, but it's improv, we're making it up. Why are there rules? There's these guardrails. Another thing I like to say to students is, we give you these rules. It's like if I was teaching someone to ride a bike in San Francisco, I would tell you all this stuff because you're going to get on a really steep hill and you're going to be like, look, I get it. I know to wear my helmet. I don't need to hear that all the time. I know how to use the brake. But when you're going down one of those crazy hills, you are going to need the rules. And the most basic one that people have heard is the kind of the principle of yes and. So if you're starting a scene with someone, a scene is a completely made up world and a completely made up story between two or more people, or yourself sometimes, if it's a monologue, based on an audience member's suggestion. So if my first word out, or sentence out is, it's really beautiful here in space, whatever. If you're my scene partner, you wouldn't want to say, what are you talking about? We're at Kmart shopping. I mean, it's just like, that's a very obvious denial. You want to yes, and you want to say, yes, it is beautiful in space, particularly because you can see the stars so much closer up. You know, you want to be on board with each other. And that's not to say that you use that in life to just say yes to everyone. But if you want to have good conversation skills, you want to listen to exactly what they said and then build on that. And I'll give a little exercise later on about how to become a better listener. But yeah.
I'm so curious because that is a way to form connections with people on the stage, right? But you just told us a story about having been not connected to someone who you saw every day and lived with. And, you know, I'm really struck by sort of like the dichotomy there. I say something very interesting about teaching writing that you just said about teaching improv, just to back up for a second. I say, I can help people learn, I can teach people structure or help them learn structure. I can help people learn how to vary sentence length and, you know, and keep their verb tenses consistent and use proper grammar. I can do all of that. And hopefully someone will come out of my writing classes feeling that they're more competent as a writer as a result, and they have more knowledge about how stories come together. But what I can't do is teach someone to see the world like a writer.
Right.
Teach someone to look at an experience or an event and come out of there and say, oh, I know how to make a story out of this. This is going to be a really good story. And here's why, here's the message here. You know, that's something that is, I think is very much, some people have naturally, and some people can develop, but it's not something I can teach in a class.
Right. And I teach monologue writing and sketch writing as well. And it's similar with that. But I met someone once who said something to the effect of, anybody can learn anything. You just have to learn it. Like nobody's, and they played the piano really, really well. And I just don't agree. I feel like I'm so bad at math, that I just don't know that it would be a waste of my time even. I'd always be kind of a mediocre or very low end math person. So we talk about going where your seed is planted. For students, there's all different kinds of theaters, there's all different kinds of ways to share your story and your comedy. And if one place tells you no, you just got to go where there's better soil for your seed, who is you.
I'm curious, you were so young when your mom died. Did anyone ever talk with you about her? Did you get a chance to get to know her, or was that very early portion of your life kind of compartmentalized on your behalf as a child?
So as a child, I had a couple audio tapes of my mom talking to me, and then I had a lot of pictures. I have never seen my mother and heard her speak at the same time. She only exists for me in photographs and recordings. And when people tell me I take too many photographs, it's kind of like, well, if I don't, that means it didn't exist. So slow your criticism roll of how much I take pictures. But so yes, no, it was not talked about. I heard certain things over and over again. It's really only the last, I'd say 10 years, I did this show about it where I discovered this trunk, like in a movie or something, when I was cleaning out her mom's house. So my grandmother lived to be like 100. I cleaned out her house, and in one of the bathrooms, a bathroom, I found this trunk with literally everything that I wish I would have had. Like the guy she lost her virginity with, a picture of him. He was a Tahitian horseback riding instructor when they were at Club Med. My show is that I show that, and then I tell my story of losing my virginity. It's like parallels. A lock of her hair, diaries. And then 3 days ago down at my dad's, I found a bunch of letters that she wrote at age 20 when she was in college to my dad when he was in college. And it's, but people didn't talk about her. I heard that she was very feminine over and over again, which was kind of funny. She used to wear very feminine little, like almost dirndl, bohemian dresses. She was becoming a special ed teacher. She had met my dad at the Camarillo Hospital for like mentally challenged children. So I've heard things here and there, but it was not talked about, and her parents didn't really talk about it. My dad, maybe here and there, but the whole thing is shrouded in this like awful sadness, I guess. So, and when I brought it up with my grandmother, who, like I said, raised me and was like, she's my definition of comfort, her reaction was really interesting. She would say, my mom's not alive either, which is like, she was like, well, of course not. And then she'd say, count your blessings. And then she'd say, whenever I was sad, my mom would tell me to leave the house and walk around the corner, and there was a man who had no arms and no legs, so count your blessings. And she was a child of like the Depression. That was her era. But yeah, it was never like, it's okay to be really sad. So it wasn't until I went to college and a boyfriend who was like my life at the time broke up with me and kind of ghosted me. He moved. It was like he died. That I had started getting in touch with it for the first time. I was 18, 19, and I started having panic attacks, and I couldn't eat and couldn't function at all. And I went home from college, ended up going back and graduating right on time. But at that point, my dad was like, we talked about it a little bit, that it, that it had been hard.
It's a story we hear in this community, not infrequently, that as we are older and can have romantic relationships, at the end of a romantic relationship will send us back.
That was the first romantic relationship, and it was like, yeah. It was major.
Will send us back, and that some of us only know how to deal with relationships that end completely. And so, experience it like a death or turn it into something that would be akin to a death by not speaking to that person ever again, or, just trying to find ways to cope. But it does often send us back to do some re-grieving or grieving for the first time if we were too young to even understand what death was then. You were too young to even understand what dead meant. 3 years old? No, there was no way.
Very much so. Yeah. And I'd love to share that article if I can find a way to share it. It's not online anywhere, but I think it'd be really interesting for everybody here, because I did ask my mom, when is she coming back? And I did say things like, I see her at night, I meet her in a warm cave, which is very sad. But yeah, so yeah, it wasn't talked about. And I think the grief continues in really different ways, new discovered discoveries.
We are seeing, it seems to me, I don't know if it's a resurgence, maybe just a surge, and a lot of up and coming, a lot of young comedians who are using stories of their parents dying in their acts. I don't remember seeing that a lot when I was in my teens and my 20s, but now I was looking online and I saw acts by Jen Welch and Ben Wasserman and Allison Zeidman, and Alyssa Lynn Paris did a one-woman show called No Bad Days about losing her dad to brain cancer. So it does seem like, there is hopefully more dialogue, more conversation around that. But you mentioned that you've done a show, and I thought maybe you could tell us about that, because you did a whole one-woman show about losing your mom. And I'm curious, how you curated it and what it felt like to get up on a stage and talk about something that happened so long ago and was so personal and that you hadn't talked about a lot with your family.
Yeah. So my dad didn't come. I didn't think he could. I actually told him not to. So yeah. How I curated it was I got really excited when I found that box of things. It all, the through line was going through milestones in her life and comparing them to milestones in my life. And I just found all this stuff. I found all this stuff about like her bachelorette party, and I had this crazy bachelorette party, and hers was just this very sweet little 1960s version. But I was at a different place, I guess you could say, in grief at that time. Because now if I did it, I don't know, I have this amazing therapist right now, and we're kind of delving into kind of what must that 3-year-old have felt, and why is it that sometimes I feel if I have a panic attack, or I feel kind of out of body, or kind of the way I explain it is like I'm just floating alone in the world. That's a weird thing to explain to someone, but when you connect that to like, well, literally you were told at age 3, the person who is the most like the source of life, literal food, comfort, everything, is never coming back, and you can't really grieve that as at a 3-year-old. It's just somewhere in me. So all of that is to say is when I put together the show, I wasn't as much, I don't want to use the word stronger, but I had a little bit more distance. And you have to do it enough times, otherwise someone's just coming to a show to watch you like exercise and cry and have not exercise, but like get your feelings out on stage. And I've seen some one-person shows like that, and I didn't want it to be like me crying. It was very funny. I'll find a tape of it and put it up online. I haven't even done that. But anyway, that's kind of how I curated it and put all of the stuff together. But I think a lot of young comedians are coming out about their stories of losing a parent young for a variety of reasons. One is, it's no secret that a lot of people want to be in the entertainment industry because they're trying to fill some kind of hole. They want to be seen. But if you really think about it, I can think about it from my perspective. It's like, I'm alive. So I want as many people to see that I'm alive and acknowledge that I'm alive. And this is my story. And I'm still here. I'm here. There's something strange about being present on a stage with live people that gives you that. Of course, also being on like film or TV, then you live kind of forever. Being heard as your most, what I do is very raw. It's live, it's improv, it's me. So being seen and kind of having people laugh with you at your most vulnerable moments is really healing, and it's super empowering. Really empowering. If that's your thing. Some people might do other arts to, get that out of their system. But for me, I love being kind of unapologetically seen. I am there, I am here on stage, and I'm alive, and I'm going to share my story with you. And I also have a thing with comedy. I feel like the depth of sorrow that I and all of us have experienced in losing our mothers, the depth of sorrow, it's just hard to explain the depths of sorrow. It digs a hole kind of in your being, in your soul, and it's so dark. But the cool thing about that deep, dark hole is that it gives more space for joy and laughter. And I feel like there's people who haven't experienced that, and so they don't have that hole. Everything's just kind of baseline. But when I feel joy or laughter, it's more, I think, than the average person. And I'm not saying in a bipolar way where it's like I'm really low or I'm really happy, but it's like you're excavated. You are, a piece of marble that's been so pounded into that kind of a masterpiece. Even if it's just you laughing, the masterpiece of you laughing and experiencing joy comes out of that pain. Yeah.
I'm thinking of other comedians who have really tragic stories, like a lot of us have seen or heard or seen interviews with Rosie O'Donnell, who lost her mom when she was young, and Pete Davidson lost his dad on 9/11. And I mean, do you ever have trouble balancing the gravity and the levity? Because you said you had a one-woman show and it was really funny. And it might be hard for some of us to think, well, you did a one-woman show about your mom dying. And how is that funny? Where do you find the humor in it, and how do you find the balance so that it does have the kind of, gravity that it deserves, but that doesn't overcome you?
Yeah, I mean, it has overcome me numerous times in my life, leading to like very significant, clinical depression. I think when you see that you can get through that and that you can laugh again, it gives you kind of faith that you can make it through. But so it can be very hard. The way I could explain it metaphorically would be, I also show this in my show. My son was born via C-section. He was 11 pounds when he was born. And because of the way in which my mom died, which was like extremely nebulous, I was and am kind of a hypochondriac. So the idea of being in the hospital and kind of trapped and they're cutting into me, sorry guys, don't want to trigger warning, but it was very violent C-section, and it's not supposed to be filmed, but my husband somehow was filming it. And I'm saying all of these awful things like, you're breaking me, and like I'm dying, but I'm also on Demerol, so my voice is like really weird. In that moment, people laugh at that video so hard because it's so awful that there's nothing you can do but to laugh at a certain point. I mean, I survived the C-section and so did he. So clearly, that wouldn't have been, but the I survived part of it is the part of it for all of it. And sometimes things are so bad,
right,
that I just look at myself or whatever moment, and it's just funny because it's so terrible.
It's so bad. It sort of crosses over into absurdity, doesn't it?
Absurdity is the word.
Almost almost caricature.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of a call we did a couple of weeks ago, but I'm also thinking about a group of women who came to a retreat, because I'm often asked, oh my God, you're doing a retreat with women who lost their moms. That must be so sad. Does everyone just cry all weekend? And I say, absolutely not. People laugh a lot. And we all share a certain kind of humor. And it's so fun to find other people who have the same kind of humor, who find or who can extract laughter from some of those dark moments. But I'm thinking of a retreat in particular where a group of women stayed up really late into the night, sharing stories about their dads. And I mean, there were stories of real hardship, like, dads who moved out when the kids were still teenagers. I moved in with a girlfriend and left them to basically raise themselves, serious stories.
Right.
But they created this hashtag. They said hashtag dad WTF. And they were just like one-upping each other with the stories, and they were laughing. Yeah. And it was actually really funny. I came in and it's the kind of thing where you feel bad for laughing.
Yeah.
They're all laughing, and because it got pushed into such extreme territory that it actually crosses the border into being funny. I think that's what you're saying, right?
It is. And pushing the border of being extreme, I mean, that's something I like to do, because at the root of it, we're human. So when somebody is comfortable enough to cry and be scared and be really frightened and be really down, it's almost the same thing of then you're comfortable enough to let go and laugh. I mean, it's a vulnerability.
Yeah. I know that you said you were going to do an exercise with us, so I want to make sure we have time for that, because we've got a little bit more than 10 minutes left. I hope that's enough time. And
It is actually, it's an exercise that they're gonna have to do at home with somebody else or with themselves. So it won't need 10 minutes. I'll just explain
okay.
it.
Sure. Yeah, sure. Love to hear it.
So yeah. So I mean, first of all, if anybody's in LA, I put my email in the thing, and I will give you a free ticket to come see improv Thursday. I'm in the show. Improv it's really something you have to watch, and it's hard to do something on Zoom, but this is something that might help you in your communication, and it'll just help you get your mind off of things. It's not necessarily funny, but the funny comes later. So I encourage you to try this with somebody. And if you don't have anybody at all, you can do it with yourself. So it's really simple. It's just called Last Letter. We would do this on stage and we'd create a whole story. But if you're doing it with a person, you're just yourself. You don't have to pretend to be anyone else. And all it is, it's very simple, but it's hard, is that you pick a topic of conversation. Okay. So I tried to do this with my husband to get my mind off the fact 4 months ago, I had a hysterectomy. So we were in the waiting room and it was going on. And I said, let's play Last Letter. And it helped get my mind off of it. So you come up with a topic. The topic could be anything. So dogs could be a topic. All it is every sentence you say, the person you're doing it with, the beginning of their response to you has to start with the last letter of what you said. Here's an example using dogs. I have 3 dogs. That's an S, right? So whatever you say back has to start with an S. Sure, you do have 3 dogs. I have noticed that they make a lot of noise. That's an E. So the person would have to say something with E. Everybody has dogs these days. Why aren't people getting more exotic creatures? That's an S. Seems to me that exotic creatures present a lot of problems. Okay, here's the thing. It seems very simple, but it's actually rewiring your brain in a variety of ways. You will be very surprised. Some of you will be deer in the headlights and won't be able to think of a word. The point is to just think of the first word that starts with that letter. It doesn't even have to make sense. That's where it gets interesting. You make it make sense. So if the person were to say, I have 3 dogs, and I can't think of an S word because we don't want you to think, you want to just come right out. Seeds. Seeds are growing in our backyard, and we're going to have watermelons soon. I wonder if your dogs are going to like the watermelon. And never met a dog who did not like all kinds of gourds. So it creates, you're coming up with words that you wouldn't normally think of, okay? The other thing it does is, most of the time when we're having conversations with people, we're not really listening. We're thinking about what we're going to say back to them all the time. We're planning our response in our head. You can't do that with this, because you have to wait till you hear literally the last letter of the last word that they say. Mm-hmm. So you can't be planning a response. If you do, I mean, it's not going to start with that letter. So it takes you down to a place where you're letting go. And in improv, we like to work in what we call the gray area, which is where we're just kind of trusting that our brain actually already has the answers. You all know a million words that start with S, but because you're on the spot, you're going to get worried and you're going to try to think of the most interesting one or the most pertinent one. No, you just say it and then you make it make sense because it already lives in your brain. And it does make you a much better listener. And it takes your mind off of yourself, which is, there's a good times to think about yourself, but like waiting for surgery is not a good time. And so it takes your mind off yourself. It can get you out of a bad mood. If you were to do it with yourself, you'd just have to do stream of consciousness and just do how I just kind of did. And then I would also just encourage people to kind of live with the yes and philosophy, which again doesn't mean being a doormat and saying yes to everyone. It means, yes, I hear what you said, and I have something to say about that that goes along with what you said, not some completely new thought. The last kind of tip, which is not a game, but would just be, they say like jump and the net will appear, or take the first step and the path will appear. That is improv. You trust that you're going to come up with the right sentence or scene without planning it. I taught Kim Kardashian improv, actually. It's on an episode of the Kardashians. And she said her biggest issue was over planning. She's a big planner. She's a big perfectionist. So it was near impossible for her to do that. So anyone out here who is a perfectionist, shake it up. This will literally change the way your brain thinks. So just leap, make a decision you wouldn't ordinarily make. Play this game and see how like the next day goes. See what words you start thinking about, see what connections you start making. It's little things that add to big things.
It occurs to me that it makes you have to be very present. Like you said,
it's a meditation. It is a meditation.
Right. And you have to be very present, very focused, but you're also going to be very creative, and you've got to have a certain amount of faith that you just start with a word and it will lead you somewhere.
Yeah.
I'm thinking this might be really good to help people get out of anxiety spirals, if you're having a thing in your head. And it also occurs to me, you can just do this in common conversation with someone. You can just pick up the last letter of what they've said and start a new sentence, and they're not going to pick up the last letter of yours because they don't know what you're doing.
Right.
But it will help you, stay very focused and present in that conversation.
Yeah. Another variation is alphabet. So that's just, you start a sentence with A, and then your scene partner has to start their sentence with B. So always, coming to the zoo makes me feel like I need a pet. So then that started with an A. Now notice that sentence didn't sound great, but that might inform a character, like always coming to the zoo. I don't know, the way that person speaks is a certain way. Makes me realize I want a pet. So B, because you're lonely. You need more presence in your life. C, Catherine, you are right. You're so perceptive. D, donuts. There are donuts for sale at the zoo, and I'm starting my no sugar thing tomorrow. So it's just, if you're always planning what you're going to say or overthinking your response to people, that can be stressful. This will take you out of that.
Wow. It sounds fun.
It's really fun, but it also brings people to tears in class because instead of just saying the first word and then making it work, they get so stuck of like, what's a D word that could happen at the zoo? What? Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And it can be really frustrating. So it's breaking through that need to come across as perfect or having it all together. You just have to throw that away.
And really stepping outside of your comfort zone.
If that's your comfort zone. Yeah.
If that's your comfort zone.
Yeah.
Right? And into the unknown.
Like I will have a lot of anxiety being stuck in traffic. But if I'm asked to do a full nude improv in the middle of a mall, I will do that fine with no anxiety. So that we all have our things, but I don't like I get panic attacks driving. Anyway, so that's what I'm trying to say. We all have our things, but this is a good one for your brain.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for sharing this with us. I want to thank you for taking the time to be with us today. And
thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely.